No movie review shall happen today. Right. Oh, the other guy's still here. What the hell are you doing here?
You were saying?
Well, no matter about him. So, I hear you all wanted to hear about IMAX, but I don't give a shite about IMAX. I'm here to talk about something near and dear to my own heart. Some real television that kicks the arse out of anything else. I'm here, of course, to talk about Season 4 of Daria. Now, the average viewer may not know that much about Daria, but it was a television show that aired on MTV in the late 90s to early 2000s. Some people also won't know that it was a spin-off from Beavis and Butthead, which I didn't know that before I researched it. In the early days of Beavis and Butthead's generation, there was a note from the executives where they asked if there could be a female perspective on the show. God knows why they needed that on a deathly show like fucking Beavis and Butthead. But they created the character of Daria Morgendorffer to act as a foil to the two foolish Beavis and Butthead. Eventually, however, it was agreed that they would spin off the character into her own show. And in 1997, Daria aired on MTV. The character's design was heavily retooled, and her family was introduced, as well as her new living location of Lawndale in an unspecified mid-Atlantic location in the United States. Daria is, it's sort of, as we all know, the one true identifier of the 90s. Fuck all the other ones. She is a cynic, a closed-off individual who will not buy into the vapidness of the sort of consumer society of the 2000s that had grown to be by that time. She doesn't care about her clothing or her image particularly, and she finds the stupidity of which her peers act with most disagreeable. Dealing with her family, her sister, both her workaholic parents, and her one friend, Jane Lane, she takes on the Lawndale High School alumni with a biting wit. Now, for 3 years, Daria aired, much loved, with a very dedicated fan base. And in 2000, the 4th season of Daria aired, which I'm not certain if it's the best season by any means, but it's one that's worthy of closer analysis for where it takes Daria. Now let's see. Season 4 of Daria was first began airing in February 2000, and it finished off in August of that same year. In my opinion, it marks this sort of transitioning point for Daria. The first 2 seasons have been very well received. There was a dedicated fan base of the main demographic for Daria was, I believe, middle schoolers to early high schoolers, but there was also a large adult contingent of fans, as is true now, as was true then. And there were many differences about it from the earlier times that we can sort of take to examine. First of all, on a purely practical standpoint, this was the first season to use digital coloration. It still uses cells, but now instead of being hand-colored in, they're done by a digital program. In the early season, you would often get scenes with characters with black hair, and you would see quite crushed blacks under whatever photography they had used. But now, there's a more vivid color scheme on the screen. It does take a bit of getting used to, but after a couple episodes, you're like, yeah, this is all right. Well, there are some animation errors. Earlier in the show, you could see sort of the edge of a cell moving around, but now it's more like the sort of bottom of the digital frame is empty, and there's often a height of pixel or two of character that's missing. You can see the background behind them. A bit shoddy, but this was quite a... Well, it was hardly the highest rating show on the net. It was MTV, as we know, a very much scrappier program compared to others as far as the animation department is concerned. But where season 4 is most interesting is how it takes the character of Daria. Daria, of course, is presented as a sardonic sort, immune to the materialistic ways of society, the unintelligence of her peers. Something that elevates Daria is that it's not afraid to show that Daria isn't necessarily in the right. It often elevates her to a position of sanity amongst those around her who are, quite frankly, insane. But she is a teenage girl. She's not utterly in the right. There's an episode in the 2nd season called Gifted, where she has to attend... She gets invited to a sort of high-class private school because she's identified as gifted. And the classmate that she selected to go along with is the African-American classmate, Jodie Langdon. Now, Jodie is probably one of the few classmates Daria has besides Jane that she can relate to on an intellectual level. But they tend to be quite different. Jodie's a lot preppier. She gets involved with extracurriculars. She's the president of the student council and all that. Whereas Daria is fairly closed in on herself. She likes her reading and whatnot, but she doesn't get involved with the student body. By the end, they have a quite frank discussion that while Daria's way works for her, it doesn't have a lot of motion to it. Jodie has a lot of expectations on her as a young African-American woman. She can't afford to sit and writhe around, especially with both of her own overachieving parents. And they both have a sort of moment of reconciliation as they understand that in some ways they'd like to be more like each other, but they're stuck in their ways. They have their own life in society. And season 4, I think, really gets on that. There's more of Jodie in the first episode of season 4, Partner's Complaint, where, due to some plot elements I'll get to in a bit, Daria cannot do her school project with Jane as she intended, but has to do it with Jodie. They have to do a school project in which they have to do a sort of financial process as sort of practice for their later life. And Jodie posits the idea of taking out a loan. They have 2 attempts at it. One in which she is sort of undervalued because of her skin color, and the second one she mentions her father's status, and it ends up in a sort of a bit of an argument between her and Daria about it, where she sees it as sort of beneath Jodie's intelligence and skill that she would stoop to such a thing. But ultimately, she realizes, Daria that is, realizes that Jodie is just doing what she can do to get ahead. And as discussed briefly, Daria sort of just letting herself down by not choosing to take these opportunities before her and sequester herself. In season 4 and 5, there's the question of the indie slate high schoolers of college and how extracurriculars and whatnot will affect them going forward. Obviously, it's not just academic aspects that Daria has to gripe with. There's also her own personal attributes. As the show goes on, it's made clearer and clearer that while it works for her, it's not always in the best thing to be doing to guard herself off. There are episodes like Psychotherapy, where she has to go to a retreat as part of her mother's work, where she understands that it's shown that she understands a great deal about her family and is willing to connect with her mother when she has a moment of weakness and fear about whether her work is getting in the way of her connection with her family. Also, in the humorously titled Groped by an Angel, she's able to relate to her sister Quinn on a religious issue. Daria is a very intellectual, largely irreligious person, but she connects with Quinn over her brief belief that she has a guardian angel and accepts that perhaps there is a force that could help and elevate her. And whatever Quinn believes that satisfies her and makes her happy, she's quite happy to allow. Which is, first off, worth rejecting because it's a good example of character development. It's interesting because you read contemporary reports at the time from people who were involved with Daria, and it would seem that the fandom largely rejected a lot of these overtures initially. Earlier seasons of Daria were more like to portray her as the superior in the right individual. And for there to be these episodes where she's sometimes taken down a peg and proven to be less of a stoic, stolid individual, it very much messed with the sort of communal perception of the character that they refer to as our heroine. They're certainly taking a drug there, aren't they? There are also, when it comes to Daria, Daria has a very good sense of its reality, of its characters, of its progression. The fandom can be very, can be, it's been 20 years, but they can often be iffy about what they like to see and what they don't like to see. There are multiple episodes where it's common in television for there to be an episode that sort of bends the genre or the format. So, I suppose I should provide an example first. An episode early on in season 4 is called Murder, She Snored, where as is alluded to by the title, after an incident in school where there is a risk in her history class of the whole class being failed after someone allegedly stole a grade. She has a dream where said classmate, quarterback Kevin Thompson, is murdered, and many different mystery-style shows are parodied. Murder, She Wrote. I believe there's a Charlie's Angels parody in there. And episodes like these often come to gripes because they're not really focusing on the thing that the show's about, Daria, about sort of real way of her personality and how it affects people, and all these rather real supporting characters that people quite love. And it sort of dawdles and goes on about other things. Another episode later on called Legends of the Mall sort of parodies these sort of urban myth tall tales. One about a shop teacher who loses all his teeth and fashions himself a pair of metal jaws that he terrorizes teenagers with. And I would have initially, a few years ago, pegged Daria as a show with particularly serialized intentions. But the most interesting thing about season 4 is that it is probably the most serialized show. Not that it's particularly serialized, but there is plot. When it comes to season 4, there are fewer things that can be more intensely discussed than the Tom arc. Now, at the end of the previous season, season 3, a new character is introduced called Tom Sloan, who was introduced as the sort of beau of Daria's best friend, Jane. The plot of that episode, of course, is Daria is quite annoyed that her time with her one friend is being monopolized by this strange sort of well-to-do man. Eventually, she sort of grows to like him. He's quite smart, actually, fairly intellectual. And through season 4, he and Jane are dating, and Daria sort of obliges her because he's not that bad. He becomes a real regular recurring character, even when an episode doesn't ultimately heavily feature aspects of his and Jane's relationship. He'll appear for a line here or there, or to talk to Daria. There's a real turning point, however, around the middle of the season, an episode called I Loathe the Parade, where Daria goes out to get some toilet paper for her poor father, who is in the bathroom. She encounters her friend Jane along the streets where a homecoming parade is happening. So her endeavors to get the toilet paper back to her father to earn a monetary reward, as is the interest of all teenagers, is stymied. But she encounters her friend, and who is waiting for Tom, and just quite... There's a sense, as each episode goes, that their relationship is starting to split and crack up some. In the next episode, Mount of Darkness, for example, I believe Tom accidentally eats some gummy bears that Jane was using for an art project, and that's a topic of scorn between them for a little while. In I Love the Parade, however, the most significant thing about that is that in her travels to get back home, Daria runs into Tom, and the two of them have to sort of escort around a minor character from earlier in the show that Daria babysat. In the progress of which, Daria finds out that she actually has quite a lot in common with Tom. He's fairly sarcastic, he's intellectual, he's good-natured, he's not a moron like many of the other drudgeons in this town that she's found herself in. And at the end of the episode, although it's not stated, there are a few moments of character lingering that imply she's looking on Tom for a bit longer than perhaps she should. Doesn't mean so very much at the time, but it's elaborated on later. The episode Fire is if you thought that was a large turning point, Fire is even greater. Daria has to stay with Jane for a small time while the family home has been burned to ashes. And curiously, Tom comes to see her a lot before he goes to see Jane. There are a few scenes of them having a spat. In fact, disagreeing about where to go out. Tom suddenly being interested in going out for pizza while Daria's there, but when she hobbles off to her room to do something, suddenly he's not so interested. And Daria herself denies being interested, but in a conversation with another character, she realizes during the end of the episode that perhaps she does. Now, this sort of thing is really quite typical for sort of teenage scenario shows. It's not unlike things you'd find in, television shows of the time with similar sort of scenarios. But the thing about Daria is that it's really not typical for her. She often eschews male attention in a way that Jane perhaps hasn't. The one character she perhaps had amorous feelings for was quite an odd kid who was very atypical in even a way Tom can't quite muster. And it's a development that's sort of new to the show in this time, where she ends up questioning sort of. Daria's a very guarded person, and even for the idea of being in a relationship here is really unthinkable for her. I mean, that's difficult in and of itself, but then it's difficult interpersonally because that's her best friend's fucking boyfriend. And Jane is Daria's one real friend. Without her, she's quite despondent. This is for a show that this came out of, Beavis and Butthead, which is quite not a particularly intellectual show of two idiots sort of wrestling in the mud for however many minutes a pop. It's just strangely elevated. This character who never seems to let anything get through her armor, this to really affect her for once.
Can I interject?
Who's
What
this
the
guy?
fuck is Daria?
Have you never heard of it? I explained it at the beginning. It's an MTV animated television show.
I've never heard of this in my whole life on this
Well, it's from
earth.
the 90s. It's a bit before our time. I don't know. I understand if you've never seen it. I mean, it's difficult to find. It was on Amazon for a time, but now it's on Paramount without the movies as well, which is unconscionable. Paramount will feel our ultimate wrath one of these days.
Wait, so MTV made this out of obligation, or like because what they were getting criticism for how they represented women. Is that it?
I don't think so. I think somebody just found the character interesting. Daria in Beavis and Butthead is not a character with the most screen time, obviously. It's mostly proffered to Beavis and Butthead and their stupidity. But she's sort of featured as this voice of reason type character, and I believe fairly well received. She ended up appearing quite a few times. On the last episode of Beavis and Butthead aired after Daria began, I believe, and she even had an appearance there, which is a bit strange on the internal show timeline, but who's really paying attention to the chronology? What's your question? What's your point?
I don't know. I'm curious. I'm very curious. I'm very, very interested in Daria.
Well, you should be. It's a very curious film.
A film?
There
I
is
thought it
a
was a
movie.
show.
We'll get onto that soon. In fact, we'll get onto that right now. No, we won't. It all
Okay.
comes to a head in the final episode of season 4, Die, My Darling, where Jane invites Daria over to help dye her hair. That setup doesn't sound particularly interesting, but in the way these characters interact before this, there's obviously an element of suspicion. Watching with foreknowledge, you can tell that Jane has picked up on the way Daria perhaps feels about Tom. And in the process of them trying to dye Jane's hair, it goes horribly wrong, and they have a huge spat about it. Jane accusing Daria of trying to steal Tom, trying to make her look hideous with a botched hair dyeing job in order to steal him away. It's a major sort of, destructive event in their friendship. And again, Jane is Daria's one friend. Without her, she proves to be very despondent. In a world that she doesn't feel understand her, Jane, upon moving to this new location at the start of the show, is her one lifeline. And the idea of even losing that is quite I mean, it's palpable on the screen, the sort of worry. Daria is often a question that rarely shows emotion, and you can. It's almost jarring to see her sort of emote sadly and angrily. Um,
I'm not. I don't really feel threatened right now. Can you look it directly in the camera? I'll feel more friend if you do that.
don't you get onto me about threatening by.
Okay, I apologize. I apologize. I
It's,
didn't mean to tell you how you operate. I am just
enough of that,
I'm
you
an
English
observer here.
rat, you. No, then where was I? Oh yes. This episode ends quite dramatically. This was a major firestorm within the community at the time this happened, because the episode ends with Tom and Jane's relationship fairly on the rocks, regardless of whatever is happening with Daria. And while they have a conversation about it, the two share a kiss. And of course, when Daria quite responsibly tells her friend the next day, it all blows up. For a show which for 3 seasons went with little in the way of plot developments, in just one season, Daria offers up an arc across a number of episodes. Partner's Complaint, there's elements of it. I Loathe the Parade, it's in Mart of Darkness. And of course, the sort of kiss arc, as it's known now, of Fire, Die, Don't Die, My Darling, and the one true ending of season 4, the movie, Is It Fall Yet? Now, Is It Fall Yet was aired at the end of August 2000, about 20 or so days after the end of Daria's season 4. It's not a movie like that. You've seen like the Simpsons movie. It's not like that. It's animated and presented much in the same way as any Daria episode, but quite a lot longer. Is It Fall Yet is about the reality of summer, I guess. Um, some people can relate to this, some people perhaps can't. But summer is presented in Is It Fall Yet as not as a period of respite for the kids and adolescents involved, but a time period where the protagonists have to use it as an opportunity in order to pursue other matters, extracurriculars to go onto their college transcript. This one character who has to work in an ice cream truck in order to pay back his father. And Daria's sister Quinn has to take tutoring and remedial classes in order to bring up her grade. Because even now in their junior year of high school, there's already talk of what colleges they want to go to. The title comes from a camp that Daria has to be a counselor at, where a preteen who should be enjoying the height of summer rather apathetically asks if it was fall yet. The summer, which should be an archetypically happy and wondrous time for a child, has been turned into a slog by their parents. Of course, within the midst of all this, there is the fallout of the Kiss arc. Tom and Daria are now in their own relationship, and while Jane claims to be okay with that, it's very clear that she isn't. The movie is understandably a examination of how these feelings develop across the summer when Daria and Jane are separated as Jane goes off to a art colony, uh, hit on by the only LGBT character in this show who is a predatory bisexual woman. God, I love the 90s.
Well, it's still MTV.
Still MTV, baby. Daria is at this time foisted with a lot of complicated emotions. Not a place a character like her particularly wants to be in. Jane is still very upset despite her claims to the contrary. She has in a relationship for the first time in her life, and she's not only unsure of it, but I mean, she's guilty. But for all intents and purposes, as much as they might claim to have made up, she more or less stole her one friend's boyfriend. There is an element to Daria's character here where she has a real opportunity here that she's unsure of to to shed some of her closed-off nature, because being able to insulate herself from the stupidities of her peers, from this sort of drab, hyper-consumer society she's in, is all well and good. But as her mother states numerous times in this movie, to close herself off from all these experiences, to perhaps not be able to get into the college she wants because of it, well, it's no way to live. And she has to understand. She has to understand that innately, in order to move out, she has to take some chances. Um, Mind you, she would probably feel better about this if she weren't so guilty. It's a difficult situation introspectively and also interpersonally. The fact of the matter is, she had to betray Jane to get this one opportunity. Uh, there are moments throughout the film where Daria is clearly self-sabotaging by finding whatever fault with Tom that she can, just in order to instigate a fight or try not to appear too into the situation as she can. She's awkward about telling a number of side characters that she's a boyfriend, because most of these characters are already aware that this Tom was Jane's boyfriend. Throughout these many vignettes of a poorly camp council, of feeling your emotions, of this dingy art colony, you do get the sense that Daria, despite her wisdom, despite her intellect, and this resolve not to conform to the shallow consumerist society of the 90s and the early aughts, she is still a teenager. She's 16, 17 years old at this time. And no wisdom that you can have can make you not 16 still. It's a very difficult, turbulent time of life. To have all the answers is impossible. And through some... The point of this movie is that Daria has to learn to climb out of herself. So, by the end, she's able to come out of her shell some and make up with Jane quite properly. Jane, who rather earnestly encourages her to get with Tom after her and him and Daria have a seemingly relationship-ending spat. The amount of development on display for a show that was largely stagnant up until then is honestly quite impressive. Take Daria's sister, Quinn, who is sort of presented as this very stereotypically, not quite brainless, as will be discussed in a second, but very fashion-oriented, vain. In the throes of this episode, it's all about how she has to get her grades up in order to get to the college she wants, and the second season is an episode. Now, what am I really saying with all this? I've been yammering up here for 30 minutes on about Daria. Why do I like Daria? Well, it's not a bloody movie. Even the movie's not a bloody movie. How are you able to connect with anything if you can't like the characters? If you can't feel that sense of progression and real, I don't know, emanation from the heart of matters and ideas? Go for three quite good seasons, I should say. Three quite good seasons before this. And then a fourth season that manages to really get the ball rolling on some characters. I mean, some shows are absolutely dead in the water by their fourth season. There's a show who actually managed to do something with it. Something that was very unpopular with the fan base at the time, sure, but that's whatever. Daria is great because it's truly timeless, despite the facts of it that are dated, like internet cafes in the very first part, bulky cell phones, Daria's parents being ex-hippies. Only ex-hippies nowadays are dead. But if you pick it up these days, you'll find something that still manages to be funny, relatable, understandable, despite being a bit dated. It's worth a watch. Daria, I think there's talk on this show that I don't watch because it's a piece of capitalist consumerist propaganda. There's talk sometimes about things nowadays being poorly and things back then being better. And nostalgia is the killer of all good things. But sometimes it is just true. Mind you, the DVD release for this, I think, on the fucking DVD release of this, let's see. In the fifth DVD, you've got like 6 episodes of the 4th season, and then 3 episodes of the 5th season, but not the movie. The movie is on the last disc at the bottom of the box, so you have to take it out, put it to one side, get the final disc out, just watch Is It Fall Yet? Take that back out, and then go back to the other disc again for the first episode of season 5. I mean, it's like nobody cares about this. But obviously someone cares, because the DVD I got is copyright 2025. I didn't think anybody would still be printing these things in this day and age. But is this camera even rolling?
It came out in 2010. The DVD is coming. It's coming. Daria is coming to DVD in 2010. Did you know that?
What? Don't ask me silly questions, you bastard.
Oh, okay.
The show's over.